Hello and welcome to Fight Smarter, Accelerate Your SOC with AI Discovered Attacks. Today's webinar is sponsored by Elastic and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech and I am excited to be your moderator for this interactive session. Now, before we go to today's great content, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of the session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement problems, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we are offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to get started with Elastic. And also, there's a PDF there of the slide deck for this presentation. So I encourage you to access those resources now or at any time during the presentation. And also feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of that prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. And with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's timely discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We have James Spiteri, who's Director of Product Management at Elastic. James, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Really excited today to be able to present this topic to you, where we're basically going to talk about how generative AI helps with bringing your SOC to the next level. We've called this accelerating your SOCs, your security operations centers, with AI-driven or AI-discovered attacks. Before we dive into the main topic, just a really quick background on what we do at Elastic from a security perspective. Elastic does many things. You might be familiar with us in the search space or perhaps use us for logging. In actual fact, we are a fully fledged security analytics platform. So everything you'd expect from a SIEM or security analytics platform where we allow you to bring in your data and any data you like, there's absolutely no restriction, and apply a tremendous amount of rich analytical content on top of it to be able to give you outcomes and any outcome you'd expect, whether that's alerts, to be able to do threat hunting, dashboards, that sort of thing. We do also have this concept of allowing you to have what we call extended protection with perhaps one of your endpoint detection and response providers or even cloud security providers. Or if you don't have anything like that yet, we also provide a native protection solution, which is essentially a native EDR agent that you can run and install pretty much wherever you like, and that's bundled in within the same Elastic ecosystem. All of this is powered by what the team we call Elastic Security Labs, who are a threat research team, incredible group of security engineers and detection engineers who are essentially looking for threats every hour of the day and writing about them, publishing our detection and protections content, and just all that value that you get pretty much immediately within the product based off of their findings. So just to recap a bit what that allows you to do, again, whether you're bringing your existing vendor or any other data source or using our native protection, bring in alerts, logs, raw events, entities, you name it, we'll make it actionable. And I like using that term actionable because we have such a tendency to just put data into a platform and do nothing with it. We don't want Elastic Security to be that platform. We want that data to be usable. And then you actually get outcomes from it. Today, of course, the main topic here is using AI. So we're going to be talking all about what we're doing with generative AI, which of course you see in that box in the middle of the screen. And primarily we'll be talking about two features. One is attack discovery, which is pretty much brand new, only about 2 months or so old. And then we'll also be talking about our AI assistant, which has been out in the wild for just about a year. So let's talk about attack discovery. And what we really wanted to try and do with attack discovery is try and help with the problem of alert triage and investigation. If any of you work within the security operations space and have been in front of a screen with hundreds of alerts and you have no idea where to start, you have no idea if there's any active attack that's going on that you should be focusing on first, this is what we're trying to help here with attack discovery. And it's essentially bringing the concept of having to triage hundreds of alerts and bringing those down to the actual attacks that matter, and doing this in seconds or perhaps a minute or two. And that's what we've tried to do with attack discovery. I'm going to be demoing this in just a minute, but just to give you a really quick glimpse into what it looks like, attack discovery will basically grab all those alerts and present a very easy to understand natural language description of any attacks that are spotted. This is working on alert content that you might have within Elastic So as alerts are being triggered, which is again one of the primary reasons why someone would have a SIEM or security analytics product. And then we sift through all of that with generative AI and try and spot those actual attacks. Very, very powerful workflow. And we've also incorporated it into what any incident responder is used to from workflow perspective, whether that's opening a case, assignments, that sort of thing. So more on this as I go through the demo. But I do also have to talk about our AI assistant. AI assistant has been, again, in the hands of our users for just over a year now. And what we really wanted to do as we entered the generative AI market with the assistant was literally have a sidekick that you could use to ask any question that you'd like about the cyber domain and about, of course, the environment you're operating in, which in this case is Elastic Security. These large language models that have taken the world by storm are exceptionally good at these use cases, whether that's asking questions about security alerts or logs and events, or perhaps asking these models, of course, which power generative AI to generate queries for you in natural language, and so much more. And this is everything that we do with the assistant. It is a perfect combination with attack discovery and, of course, any other future workflow we have. And it's always there ready for you to be able to ask any question that you'd like. We've built in a ton of features into the assistant, so I'll just go over some of them here. And again, I'm going to demo this pretty extensively. But one of the more popular reasons why our users have been using the assistant is to generate queries in our query syntax. Elastic has very rich query capabilities. It's a very powerful threat hunting and investigation platform. We didn't want people to have to know every single bit of in and out of all these languages. So you could literally just ask a natural language question and we'll give you the correct query back. And this is very, very helpful when you're going through these like threat hunting scenarios, like really, really powerful. And of course, any follow-up investigations from something like attack discovery. It's also really good at being able to generate tailored remediation advice, either as a follow-up from attack discovery or even just with plain old alerts in general. The assistant is aware of your context. So it's a very, very powerful thing to be able to ask and have these responses tailored to your individual environments, which is also really, really powerful. We wanted to make sure that both the assistant and attack discovery were secure by design. It's for us as a security company, it's really important that we're giving you tools that you're comfortable using. We know there's a lot of privacy concerns with using large language models and using third-party connected services. So we added a tremendous amount of these features that make it secure by design, whether that's the ability to anonymize data on demand, especially as we're utilizing alerts so heavily here. It's all controlled via role-based access control, which is very, very powerful. So you can basically allow people to do what you're comfortable with when it comes to using the assistant or perhaps changing certain settings. And every single action is auditable, whether someone decides to turn on anonymization or change a specific value, that is all tracked and audited. We also wanted to give you the peace of mind to be able to track the usage. And when I say usage, mainly the consumption of these large language models. So with Elastic Security and Elastic in general, really, we take this concept of, bring your own model. So you subscribe to something like Azure's OpenAI service or Amazon Bedrock or others. You have a key, you add that to Elastic Security, and then you use the model you're most comfortable with using. Very, very powerful approach because we don't lock you into a specific model. But that also means you might want to just be careful in terms of the consumption and the usage of these models because there is, of course, an associated cost. So we did build the tracking for that all right within the platform. So you can see here a dashboard of the consumption per model and per user within my environment as well. a bit of how it works under the hood, and one of the things we feel gives us a bit of an edge as Elastic when building these solutions. So Elastic is not only an incredible security product, but of course, like we said, it's also used very heavily for search. In the domain of generative AI and large language models, a search platform, particularly a platform that allows you to do something called vector search, is a huge advantage when building these solutions. Vector search can be used via a mechanism called retrieval augmented generation. No need to get into the nitty gritty, but essentially what it allows us to do is use data that's stored within a customer's context as supplemental knowledge to what these models might know. This is using something called semantic search under the hood, and we do all the hard work for the user, but essentially that's how we're able to do what we do. Very, very powerful retrieval augmented generation thanks to the power of Elastic, and we bundle all of that in. So you as a user don't really need to worry about it at all. This is used in the assistant, also, of course, to use in attack discovery. So very, very powerful features, and that's how we're able to do a lot of what we do in the generative AI space. Now let's get into a bit of a demo, because a lot of this comes across when you actually see it in action. So what I have on my screen here, this is Elastic Security. This is what we call the alerts page. So this is typically where someone using Elastic Security, especially someone in a security operations team or security analyst, this is where you would go to triage and investigate any alerts within your environment. Of course, an alert is something that would have triggered based off of a finding or a query that is running, either via the out-of-the-box content that we provide as Elastic. So we have a tremendous amount of these detection rules looking for this activity, or perhaps any rule that you might have created yourself. Every single environment is going to have some level of custom rules that are going to trigger these alerts. Now, in my situation here, I've sat down to start my day, and I'm already greeted with 100 alerts. In traditional SOC teams, having 100 alerts is a pretty slow day. It's very common that you'll probably have more in the thousands, which talks about the problem we're trying to solve here with attack discovery. It's exceptionally time consuming to have to go through all of this and investigate every single alert, but that's the norm. Unfortunately, teams are so used to this that it's just what they know and what they expect to do. And you can see here I have a bunch of different alerts, a bunch of different severities, different technologies. Really hard for me to even know where to start. So with attack discovery, we wanted to change that paradigm. We don't want you to have to worry about having to go through all of these. We want to leverage the power of large language models and retrieval augmented generation to solve, or at least give you a really strong starting point when it comes to these investigations. So in this case, I'm not even going to attempt to even investigate one of these alerts, because we'd run out of time on this webinar really quickly. I'm just going to pivot to attack discovery. And I'll show you what it looks like before I do anything here. And it's essentially the simplest interface in the world. It's literally one button. This just came out a few weeks ago, like we said. So as we're testing the waters, there are a few limitations in terms of how many alerts this works on. But essentially, there's one button which allows you to generate and look for any attacks within your environment over the 100 alerts that we have. This is where I would pick my model. Like I said, you can go in, configure the model of your choice, and literally that's the only configuration setting you might want to set up. And perhaps you might want to set up those anonymization settings that you have at your disposal. And once you do that, you literally just hit generate. So this is what it looks like before you run anything. I did pre-run this, so I'm just going to hit this button. But so we don't have to wait too long on this webinar, because it might take a minute or two. I did pre-run this just a couple of minutes ago. And I want to walk you through these results because it's pretty exceptional what attack discovery is able to achieve using a large language model and retrieval augmented generation. So we started off with those 100 alerts. And what the model has identified here is, listen, within those 100, there are 15 alerts which are exceptionally critical for you to focus on first. One thing I should have mentioned is what happens when we hit that generate button is we get all those alerts that you have in your queue. We do some filtering, we do some sorting, we do any anonymization that you might have applied, and then send them to the model for evaluation with very specific instructions. In this case, out of those 100, it said, listen, these 15 that we're seeing here are definitely 15 you want to look at first. It doesn't mean the other 85 are totally irrelevant. It means they can probably wait, because based off of this 15, there's definitely something bad going on here. Those 15 alerts are making up 2 active attacks. So we didn't just bubble up or prioritize 15 alerts. We've spotted that there are 15 alerts which are contributing to a very high risky activity within your environment. And then we were able to determine what was actually happening within those 15 alerts. So there's 2 active attacks going on, which means these are the attacks that I should absolutely be spending my time on first. And if we take a look at these, we'll soon be able to identify why we were told that these are more important than pretty much anything else we had in our queue. The first one is, hey, listen, the first attack we're looking at is basically there was a malicious macro, so like Excel macro, leading to internal reconnaissance and data exfiltration. And even if you read that title alone, if you do this day in, day out, you know that's very bad. So we're very glad this was bubbled up to us. We've tried to make this interface as streamlined as possible to be able to carry out any follow-up investigation, and also give users the ability to interact with the results just like they would in any other page within Elastic Security. So what I mean by that is, you see, I can click on James, for example. I can see the risk score. I can see James's asset criticality and any other information about James. Same with the hosts. So you can interact with these just as if you were on the specific like host or user details pages. Very, very important as you're doing these investigations to determine what was spotted here. But then, of course, the real power is in the description and in the summary. So let's read that summary together for this attack here. Let's look at what it told us. It said, listen, James on this host opened a malicious Excel file that dropped a suspicious executable. The user then scanned an internal Linux host, which was subsequently compromised to exfiltrate data to an external Slack workspace. Even just that one sentence is pure gold. If I had to go back to that list of 100, investigate them all, and attempt to come to this conclusion, it would have taken me hours. And I don't say that just because we're on this webinar. It's absolutely true. Just the ability to be able to sift through everything, know what to sift through first, correlate them, put them all together, and then stitch the entire story end to end, it would have taken hours to do, assuming I had the right skill set to do it. And in this case, with that one click of a button, within a minute or so, we got these results. But of course, we didn't stop at the summary. We got the full details of the attack here. So it said, listen, here's exactly what happened in pretty much chronological order. So James on this host executed this particular file, which had the macro in it. The file created a suspicious registry key and spawned a certutil process, which decoded into this particular file. The file then exhibited abnormal behavior. James then used Nmap to scan the set of ports. On the scanned host, so we identified there's another host involved here, which is why this is really powerful, because it actually identified lateral movement. It said on the scanned host, the Java process spawned an abnormal shell child process. The shell process downloaded these files and then executed one of them. And then curl was used to exfiltrate this particular file to an external Slack workspace. So this is amazing, right? This is what I would absolutely want to know about first. So I'm really glad that Attack Discovery bubbled up this, and I can start working on this now. This is obviously extremely risky and posing a definite risk to my organization right now, because we know data was exfiltrated. We know there's an attack that is spawning multiple hosts. So this is exactly what we're hoping to find here with Attack Discovery, these sort of attacks. Not to say, of course, this other one is also really bad as well. So here it was determined that on this Mac OS host, as an example, an application was downloaded and installed which attempted to phish a user for their credentials. So also really, really bad behavior here. Now, we didn't want to stop there. So we said what the attack was. We told you in all explicit detail, but we've given you even more to help you. So if you wanted to see the alerts which contributed to this particular attack, we can see there's 7 alerts here. You can pivot to this alerts tab, and you can see the individual alerts. You can even interact with them, just like you would on the alerts page. That is totally possible. You can also use our timeline if you wanted to investigate further. Our timeline is like a investigative workpad and will automatically filter for those alerts for you just with the click of a button. Timeline also allows you to use things like our event analyzer, which is a graphical view of the process tree. So we've built all of that stuff in right at the tip of your fingers and tried to make it exceptionally easy for you as well. But we didn't stop there. So it's very common now, if you come to this sort of situation and you do manage to come to this conclusion, we need to start reporting on it, right? We need to start letting other team members be aware of what's happening or the wider business. So we've built in the ability to immediately add this to a case. We have cases within Elastic, which is a very common thing to have within a security analytics platform. So we can go ahead and say, okay, let's add this to a new case here. We automatically populate all the data from the discovery. I'm just going to assign this to myself and perhaps bump up the severity. But that's all I need to do. I hit the create case button, and then we can view that case. And now we can see we have all the content from the discovery retained in the case. Because even if I did get to that conclusion and I spent all those hours doing it, the last thing I'd want to do is have to type this out manually. So we also made sure to be able to add that and keep it neatly retained in its markdown syntax, so you don't have to do any of this mundane work. Nobody likes writing these reports. At least I've never met anyone who said they enjoy writing these things. We also attached all the alerts which were related to that specific attack. So now they're all contained within this case, so I can continue my investigation, or someone else can come and pick it up and continue that investigation. But we didn't stop there. So if we just pivot back to that attack, this is now a stage in my investigation and follow-up where I might want to bring in the assistant. So like I said, we've had the assistant for a while, and here's where it shows how powerful it is for me to perform any follow-ups. So I know there's an attack happening. Attack Discovery found it for me. We were able to create a case with this, but I'm not really sure how I should be remediating this or following up. So I'm going to ask the assistant to help me here. So I'm going to click View in the AI Assistant, and what happens is we get the assistant opens up a new chat for me. It attaches the content from the discovery here, so you can see that if I expand it. And I can ask now any question that I like, including, as an example, the ability to ask for remediation advice. We have this concept of quick prompts here, which are it's basically a feature of the assistant where you can save questions that you might want to ask repeatedly, so you don't have to type them in every time. So in this case, I have a pre-saved prompt which says, listen, how would I remediate this? So I'm going to ask the assistant that question, and now the assistant is going to tailor a response for me based off of this attack and also based off of my environment. So it says here, listen, you're going to want to isolate these affected systems. You're going to want to terminate these malicious processes. You're going to want to block any malicious IPs and domains. And it's giving me very clear instructions, right? So it says which systems, it says which processes. It says here, like, you want to block the domain of the Slack workspace, for example. You're going to want to remove these files, clean any registry keys, so on and so forth. Change credentials for James. So very, very powerful response here where I know exactly what I should be doing now. And it's tailored this response to this attack and also based off of our environment. We can go ahead and add this to the case. So we opened that case before, just a few seconds ago. And now, because the assistant gave me these steps, it's very, very powerful for me to be able to say, okay, let's add this to the case we just had. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that case. And now it's been added. And now, of course, typically in a security operations environment, I would go ahead and start going through these steps. One thing I'll point out is, we mentioned the capability to work with other third-party EDR solutions. I do want to point out that this attack was actually put together, this attack discovery, based off of third-party EDR data. In this case, it's SentinelOne, and it's also using AuditD, a very, very common choice for being able to log security events on Linux systems. So I just want to point that out, that this will work with pretty much any data. I'm also pointing out that for these third-party systems that we interact with, like SentinelOne as an example, we do support taking third-party actions. So in this case, if it's told me to isolate the affected system, we can go ahead and do that from here. So I'll just show a really quick example of that, where here's that Sentinel-1 host. We can see it's healthy. I can go ahead and isolate it right through here, should I wish. I'm going to leave it active because I don't want to break any workflows. But just to point out that we do allow our users to do that with both native Elastic tooling as well as third-party tooling. So just going back to the assistant real quick, we now have our remediation steps to follow. I'm going to ask another question here because there was a situation where it was a bit vague, where it told me, listen, you're going to want to clean the registry entries here for that Excel file. It didn't really tell me which registry entries. It also didn't really give me a clear description about how. Thankfully, I can ask the assistant to elaborate. I can say, listen, you mentioned I should remove that persistence from the registry. Can you tell me how? And use the context about what you know about my environment to give me that correct registry information. So we're now going to go ahead and ask that question, and the assistant is going to hopefully now give me a more tailored result back. But I wanted to show how, because this is a conversational chat and assistant, you can ask it to elaborate, right? That's the whole point here. Just the ability to use the assistant as a perfect follow-up to attack discovery means you can ask to elaborate on pretty much whatever you like. And now you can see here, it told me exactly what registry key to clean up, what to press on Windows, where to click, where to navigate to. So it told me all of these things. Now, one more thing I'd like to highlight when it comes to these situations is, it's very common that if someone starts to go through these steps, someone else on the team might want to continue following up and continuing this investigation. So as an example, someone might start that cleanup, the containment process and the eradication. But you know what? I really want to know what else James is doing here. So we know that James was involved in this attack. I typically, in this situation, would probably want to do some follow-up hunting or threat hunting or queries that will allow me to start identifying if perhaps James's account got compromised, or this is perhaps insider threat activity that James is carrying out. So that would mean I need to build and run a query to do it. Well, thankfully, the assistant knows how to build these queries for me. So I'm not going to go ahead and type out a query or do any of that stuff. I'm just going to ask the assistant to do it. So I have another saved prompt here where I'm asking the assistant, listen, can you help me generate an ESQL query? ESQL is our latest and greatest query language. It is a piped query syntax, so very, very powerful for threat hunting and these situations. And you can see I told it, I need a query to look for this user's behavior in this particular data set. And I'd like the results counted by what we call the event category. You can see I was pretty vague. I said, look for this user's behavior. I didn't say James's behavior, but it was able to identify that context because it knows what attack I'm currently investigating. And you can see here now it said, okay, here's the query you're going to need. And it also told me exactly what this query is doing. We can now, if we want, go ahead and run it. So I can click on this investigating timeline. We already saw the timeline. Let's just expand the time range here. And you can see it automatically put in that query for me, and now it gave me the results. ESQL also allows you to build charts and that sort of thing. So now I can see, for example, James had over 45,000 file interactions. So I can start to look into those. I can keep asking it to elaborate on that query. So just to show how powerful these features are at pretty much every stage of the workflow, including initial findings and follow-up investigations. I'm going to save this timeline and add it to our case. Just call it investigating James. Just to highlight that is something we can do just for completeness sake. You can, of course, save your work and add it to the case. A couple of errors here. Oh, I know why that's happening. I'll pivot to this tab. You can, of course, do that, and you can go and reference your timelines at any time. You can add it to the case. That's the beauty of a live demo, by the way. Sometimes things do go wrong. But just to show you that you can keep adding these findings to your case as you go along. So just to open up the assistant again and recap exactly what we did here. So we started off with attack discovery. Extremely powerful. We spotted those attacks from those initial 100 alerts. We got everything we needed to know exactly what happened. Very simple English and natural language. We asked the assistant for some follow-up remediation advice. We asked it to elaborate even more when it was a tiny bit vague. We also then asked it to generate a query for us right here. And we ran it. We saw the results. We saved the timeline, attempted to attach it to the case, ran into a bit of a hiccup there, but that's not an issue at all. So just for you to see how powerful it is to have all of these tools at your disposal, and this is why we're focusing so heavily on generative AI at Elastic, because we firmly believe, as we're seeing here, how exceptionally powerful these tools can be for anyone using our platform. One more thing I'd like to show just before I wrap up the demo here is this is the area where you could set what you'd like to be available to the assistant and attack discovery. So, that whole anonymization portion. So you can see right now I have 128 allowed fields. I'm not currently anonymizing anything right now, but I do have the option to anonymize pretty much whatever I like. So we've given you all this flexibility. So at no point do we force you into anything. Like, you have the full ultimate freedom and choice in terms of what gets sent to these large language models, just in case there are any privacy concerns or anything of the sort. And we can also decide to anonymize any of these values. So you can turn something off, you can turn it on and anonymize it, totally your choice. And all of these are saved as defaults. And again, if you did not want anyone to be able to change these things, you can apply the appropriate role-based access control to prevent them from doing that. So with that being said, that's what I had for the demo today. Hopefully you're seeing how powerful having generative AI with security analytics is, and that's why we've added such a heavy focus here. I'd just like to thank you all for having me again today, and we can definitely take some time for questions.
All right. Yeah, that was a great demo, James. And actually, before we get to some audience questions, I've got a couple of questions for you myself. The first one is, it seems like the assistant could transform regular users into power users of Elastic with things like, generating the SQL code. This is kind of vague, but have you guys tried to quantify the skills, the skills elevation that customers can expect?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've done some research ourselves, but we've also had some third-party research done in general about how either what I showed there on things like ESQL in general, or even just other generative AI features for security can help. We've seen anywhere from a 20 to 50% increase in productivity from using these features, which is pretty impressive when you think about it. I put myself in the user's shoes. Like, obviously, I demo what I just showed pretty often, but it still shocks me every single day how much quicker I'm able to actually give that sort of demo, like without having to type queries or know everything. So that gain is definitely real. Kudos to folks like Microsoft as well. Like, they are obviously one of our competitors, but they put out pretty significant research how these sort of tools help, and the sort of the gains that people have over there. So and again, we've seen anywhere between 20-50%, sometimes even more. The fact that anyone can just sit down, ask a natural language question, and get a fully functioning query is not something we've been able to provide in our product before, and many other products similarly. So yeah, there's definitely significant gains there.
Yeah, that's really compelling. The next one has to do with one of the examples that you showed. So, is AI generating that summary in the case of the malicious Excel file that dropped a suspicious executable, or is that more hard-coded from Elastic's experience and machine learning and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So most of it is being driven by the large language model. So one of the key advantages of these models is how they're able to reason between the provided data points. So what Elastic is doing there, what it's providing, is structured data of the alerts. So attack discovery is actually built based off the alerts that the user has in their environment, as we just saw. But then giving explicit instruction to the model on what to look for and how to structure the output. So especially in this very early version of attack discovery, we're not giving like any examples of historical things we've seen ourselves or what our research team, Elastic Security Labs, has seen. So these models are able to determine the attack purely from the rich information they're getting from the alerts, and obviously with the instructions from our side. We do intend on adding some examples based on what we've seen in previous attacks and that sort of stuff. So this is where we'll use the advantage of being built on top of Elasticsearch and use the whole retrieval augmented generation concept to be able to help the model make, let's say, more deterministic observation there. But so far, they are just exceptionally good at handling these sort of or I should say, stitching of what happened based off of the rich alert context.
Very cool. Very cool. And one more question for me before I promise we'll get to some of these questions that are coming in from the audience. But how long does it take to get Elastic tuned to a customer's environment? Whether that's training LLMs or other steps. What's the process and the time?
Yeah, thankfully it's an exceptionally quick process. So as long as customer has Elastic already spun up, ingesting some data and running alerts, doing what I just did, maybe have a 5-minute setup time, which is very, very compelling for users to try it out. And this is why we have so many people using this in production already. So, for all of our existing customers, this was literally just pretty much a flick of a switch where they wanted to start using these features, because they just add their large language model connector and then maybe just tweak the anonymization and privacy settings, and they're pretty much good to go. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of gains for very, very little effort once you already have the Elastic instance up and running and generating alerts. Even if you don't, so let's say you started from absolutely nothing and wanted to say, okay, from this afternoon, I'm going to start using Elastic. So that's also not a very lengthy process itself. You maybe need like a few hours to get some data in there, spin up an Elastic cluster, probably in our SaaS environment or Elastic Cloud, spin up an agent or two, start streaming in data, turn on all the pre-built alerts that we have, and you're pretty much going to be able to start running these things that I just showed. So even if you did start from absolutely nothing, it's not a huge process to get there.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So some audience questions here. This one's for Brian, who's asking, how does Elastic handle large language models from hyperscalers, like Google, Amazon, Microsoft models, or even local models?
Yeah, great question. So in fact, in what I just presented in my demo, I was using a combination of models via Amazon Bedrock as well as Microsoft Azure. So we as Elastic don't provide our own large language model because we don't want. We're not in the business of competing with these vendors of large language models. They do a phenomenal job, industry standard, and have extremely good models there. So what we do is we've built connectors to integrate with all of these. We started with Microsoft Azure's OpenAI service, OpenAI themselves, Amazon Bedrock, and very, very soon we do have Google coming up. So covering all of those bases. So you pick whichever model you prefer, and then we will take care of the rest. This is also true for local models. So we will basically support any local model that someone might want to host via, as long as it's using like an OpenAI SDK for the inference service, we'll be able to support it through our OpenAI connector. We do have quite a few customers doing this, especially if they operate in fairly sensitive environments or an air-gapped environment. So that is something we do support. I will say, obviously, there are limited numbers of local models that perform as good as the commercial models available. So just to keep that in mind, like whilst you can do it, there's a very little chance they're going to perform as well, especially for something like attack discovery, which needs very, very advanced reasoning. But for the chat use cases, like you saw me do with the AI assistant, for the most part, these models that you can host locally will do a fairly good job. Like Mistral have the Mixtral family of models, which is really nice and open source. We just saw the announcement of Llama 3.1 this week, which is supposed to be the best open source model there is. So if someone wanted to host that locally, they absolutely will be able to do it and use it.
Okay, excellent. And that leads kind of to a question that Warren is asking about, is using AI safe for privacy concerns? And I'll just sort of extend that question about, like when you're sort of, uploading data about your own security environment into a large language model, are there any considerations there about, that information becoming public or best practices for not allowing that to happen?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So first of all, we do understand there are privacy concerns, especially in when we're dealing with security analytics, we're dealing with pretty sensitive data for the most part. So the first thing we did there was we did build in a whole like anonymization framework. So even if you did have concerns, you can decide, listen, I do want to be able to send this data, but I do want to anonymize it and obfuscate it from what these large language models do end up consuming. So we built all of that in. And if you didn't notice it in my demo, that's a feature because we do automatic translation of what you've anonymized back. But you also have full control over what you're comfortable with sending. So we didn't want to build this sort of black box approach where we're integrating with the model, we don't show you what we're sending, and we don't allow you to configure it. That's the total opposite of what we've done. I will also say that especially the enterprise accounts, or I should say like folks like Microsoft Azure, Amazon Bedrock, Google, and all those, they implement a very strict privacy model. So they don't use your data for any form of training purposes. Obviously there's still going to be some skepticism around it, which is totally acceptable. But I do ask, like, I get this question so often, and the same people who are asking me about this also have their entire Active Directory in Microsoft Enter ID and use their email services. So like, this is no different to that now. So I just wanted to highlight that, like, it's okay to be skeptical and have concerns. We have given you features to help you feel more comfortable about it, and you have full control. But just keep in mind, this becomes like any other cloud service. As long as you do your due diligence and your research, knowing what security model these vendors have provided, I think that is the most important part. And I think that is what most people struggled with in the very beginning. This pretty much came out of nowhere with ChatGPT. People were just asking random questions, and they were like, hey, hang on a minute. Nobody thought for a second to scrutinize like the privacy policies and stuff. And I think we're over that hump now where people are scrutinizing and looking at these things. And there's more like guidelines from folks like OSP and others about how to use like generative AI systems securely with privacy.
Yeah. A lot of good points there. Thank you. Next question comes from Paul, who's wondering, can Elastic help detect attacks on AI models? Giving the examples like data poisoning, hallucinations, data integrity compromises.
Absolutely. In fact, we published a whole like briefing document about it. We actually announced it as RSA along with the attack discovery announcement this year. So we've actually provided ways and detection rules to try and detect sort of these most common attacks. We focused on the OWASP top 10 attacks, which were highlighted, data poisoning, hallucinations, they're all there. So short answer is yes. We've built in native integrations to ingest the logging and metrics from the most common large language model vendors. And we're looking for attacks within those resulting logs. The good news is, folks, again, like Microsoft Azure and Google, they're all providing exceptional logging for these things, which means it's easy for us to then provide users with detection mechanisms and that sort of stuff to be able to detect these attacks. We've also written a blog and experimented with like proxying requests to these large language models to detect stuff there. This is more of an experiment than actually something we've productized. But just to give you an idea of some other ways that we've looked at to try and detect these sort of attacks. And all of this is available, by the way, on our Elastic Security Labs website. I'm happy to put the link as a question there for everyone to have it. But essentially, we highlight some of this research. There's also the briefing document that I described. So it's all there if anyone wants to view it.
Okay. Yeah. No, that actually dovetails or goes right into the next thing that I wanted to ask you, which is just that, I think we've sort of we're through all the questions, and if somebody wants to get started with Elastic or find out more, you've mentioned a couple of resources there. Any other advice or suggestions?
My suggestion and advice is, yes, it's me talking to you about generative AI and showing you all these really cool things. But honestly, if you haven't tried it out yet to see if it makes your life better, even if you forget everything I showed you today, give it a go. Like, honestly, either if you're in the cybersecurity industry or not, generative AI is extremely powerful and helpful for pretty much anything you do day to day. I can guarantee it. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better pretty much every month. The competition in the generative AI market is tremendous. So these vendors are putting out more capable models pretty much week after week. So that would be my advice. Like, honestly, try it out. Even if it's like within a closed environment, if you're not ready to try things out in production, that's totally fine. But just honestly, like go ask a question, go ask the assistant or something else, something that you didn't think you'd be able to do in the past, and see what sort of answer it gives you. It's really phenomenal what this technology is able to help with.
Yeah, and James, I just want to say thanks. This has been a really exciting presentation for me, because I mean we've been hearing a lot about generative AI and some of the the business cases for it, and it's really exciting to see it actually implemented in Elastic's products, and the way that you guys are using it to enhance what you're doing. It's just this has been a great presentation. Really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, and James, maybe if you can stick around for a second, just if you want to put that link that you were talking about in the questions, we'll just hold the event open so that people can see that link.
Yeah, let me do that right now.
I'll keep an eye out for that. All right. So before we wrap up here, we do have one more piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. Oh, and hang on, James has the link in. Let me push that out. So it's www.elastic.co/security-labs. So there's the link. Thanks, James. And the winner of our $250 Amazon gift card is Maria Lennon Laus from California. So congratulations to Maria. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Elastic for making this event possible. And thanks, as always, for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.